Welcome to Media Makers Spotlight from Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. We bring you conversations with industry professionals for behind the screens, insight and inspiration.
Welcome, everyone, to Media Makers Spotlight. I'm your host for this episode, Tara Jabbari, and today we have Shellée M. Haynesworth, an Emmy and Telly award-winning director, producer, storyteller, and writer. She's the visionary behind Indigo Creative Works, a boutique multimedia content studio, and it's acclaimed for crafting visually compelling narratives that explore the intersections of art, culture, Black, LGBTQ, history, racial equity, and social justice. Her work inspires resilience and amplifies the voices of those historically marginalized. Shellée has collaborated with leading media outlets and institutions, including Black Entertainment Television, BET, PBS, Firelight Media, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Gates Foundation, Meta, among many others. Welcome, Shellée.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that glowing introduction. Thank you so much, and excited to talk to you.
It was hard to pick and choose which ones to mention.
Well,
the list keeps going on and on and on.
And hopefully that'll be the case moving forward and just keep growing.
Well, I wanted to say, how did you end up working with such diverse but very important, big institutions, as you said, in, I would say, this niche of bringing about the voices of historically marginalized voices in the first place?
Well, I guess I landed in, this position, and the last few years I've really sort of honed in on, focusing on, elevating and amplifying the voices, the marginalized voices, in our community, because that resonates for me. And ultimately my goal as far as the African American experience, and specifically women and as well, is to expand the narrative. I feel like there are certain tropes that are always highlighted when you look at, the African American community, but our contributions are wide and varied, you know what I mean? And so that is what has compelled me to sort of hone in on these stories.
Did you start independently and then making connections with the Smithsonian or NBC or PBS, where they were like, actually, we saw your independent film. Could you actually do this for our project? Or how did that become involved with partnerships?
So I've partnered with, these organizations. As you mentioned, I've partnered with some production houses as well to produce this work. Colleagues, I've done, some of the work directly that has been commissioned. Indigo Creative Works has been commissioned, for some of these projects as well. And so that's how I've landed, and just really honing in on these storylines, that I feel will help to expand, the narrative and just the achievements of, specifically African American women and the African American community at large. So the last few years, I've really, I've been laser focused on telling those stories because I think it's important and it's empowering and it's needed, especially as we, I don't know where you're based, but I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and just based on the narrative that is being shared about, the African American experience here in D.C. And as a native Washingtonian, I think it's critically important that we can, I personally, as a storyteller, continue to amplify and elevate, just some positive stories about folks who have made some significant contributions.
So yeah, you were establishing yourself as the one that would share the African American female voices that if people kept thinking of it in one way, you're like, well, there's a million different ways that they are contributing to their community, not just that one way that you keep talking about.
Yeah, that same storyline for me, again, it's about expanding the narrative and balancing as well,
So it was sort of like niching yourself, and then people were like, Shellée is the one to get to. Have you found that that's been a cater to your success, that you became a niche and known for that? Or is there another way that you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think I've just been fortunate, like my latest project, Camille A. Brown Giant Steps. It was commissioned by Firelight Media American Masters, and it's highlighting Camille's story. She's a 5-time Tony nominated choreographer and director who is breaking barriers in Broadway and other, small stages and screens. She's breaking barriers. In fact, she was the first African-American woman choreographer and director to choreograph and direct a Broadway play since Katherine Dunham in the 50s, like 67 years. And this is something she did in 2022. And so, again, you just have to put the stories out there. And fortunately, her story resonated with PBS and Firelight Media, and just her story and how she's infusing our culture, and elevating it. And she's, been a success at doing it. We're expanding the narrative. Here's a woman that's and she's created this big machine, and she's also uplifting other dancers and choreographers, and they're coming through her pipeline. So she's expanding the talent pool. And so that's, again, as I talk about expanding the narrative and balancing the narrative, and then also talking about resilience and achievement and success, I think she's a prime example of what I'm talking about as far as my goal and my vision as a storyteller,
That was one of the things that I wanted to bring up when you said you wanted to inspire others. And I was going to mention that this is one of your more recent projects.
Yes.
It's called Giant Steps, right?
It's Camille A. Brown Giant Steps, and it's streaming on PBS right now.
I watched it, and one of my favorite parts, it's in the beginning, and I can't remember if it's in the trailer, but she talks about how she will go and either audition or ask for a grant or something, and people will be like, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. And, then she goes, and then I got it. And I didn't expect that, because you just keep thinking, you're like, yeah, I've heard that. And you're like, oh, she got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, in fact, that's so my line now. I'm using that line all the time. And I got it. That's how she says.
And then hear that she's the first African-American woman to choreograph on Broadway in
direct.
Over 60 and direct in over 60 years.
67 years.
But it's also like, it's been done before and it's doing it again. So it's going to happen again. So
and just showing, empowering people,
Exactly. And it's this one area where you don't really think about it, which is the director or the choreographer. These are really important parts in any production, but you think of Broadway or in a play, particularly in musical. I think hers was, is it Hell's Kitchen?
Yes, it's Alicia Keys's, and her latest work also is Gypsy. Which just ended with one of my favorite Broadway actresses, Audra McDonald. I love Audra McDonald. So she choreographed Gypsy. And in fact, Audra performed one of the numbers on the Tony Awards this year as well. So and Camille was nominated, but unfortunately she didn't win.
But it shows that it can be done, and it's that inspirational thing that and also that you were able to get her story told. And also, I had a question about that. Like, this is just one example, but with Camille A. Brown, like, she's a director, she's a choreographer. Kind of show about like how maybe it was her mother who says, "Oh, I never had to push her to go to dance class," or how did you decide, oh, this is what I'm going to concentrate on? It's this, or was it they reached out to you to talk about that she's the first to do this?
Oh no, that was again what attracted. In fact, I would also add I'm the co-director. My co-director is Michelle Parkinson, who I've collaborated with on a few projects, another native Washingtonian, amazing director and storyteller. But that's what attracted us to her story, and we hope that, again, that it would resonate with, Firelight Media and PBS American Masters. And it did, because it's showing the whole thrust of the series is called In the Making. Mm-hmm. And so it highlights artisans like Camille. This was the third season, and she was the first dancer that was featured in the series. So it just aligned, and our story resonated, and they were totally aware of it. And we were just fortunate that the executive producer as well of PBS American Masters is a huge Broadway supporter and fan. So they were just thrilled to, have us tell Camille's story. So it was a blessing.
You've also, I was looking at a little bit older into your resume, if you will. You've done other things, like you did a couple of videos on Latinos in Hollywood, like the history.
Yes.
You did women's lands rights and entrepreneurial efforts for USAID in rural areas in countries like in Kenya, Uganda, India, as well as LGBTQ plus active history of their activism in Washington, D.C. and stuff. So it hasn't always been, as we've been discussing in the first part, of African-American women. You've had a little bit of, as we discussed in the opening, to give voices to the historically marginalized. How do you decide of like, this is what I'm going to concentrate on, like this element of this person?
So fortunately, for the Black LGBTQ project that I did, I partnered with, because as we talked about in the beginning, which is critically important in this industry, it's about collaborations, and partnering with other creators and storytellers. So Michelle, my co-director of Camille A. Brown Giant Steps, she came to me about the opportunity to produce that documentary, which is called Fierceness Served, the Unique Alley Coffee House, which is about another very impactful space here in DC where, it catered to the Black LGBTQ community in the 80s and 90s, early 90s. And it was a space, because again, sadly, we weren't able to, the community wasn't able to be a part of the general population. And so they had to create their own spaces where they could activate, their stories and their plays, and just address, things that were happening within the LGBTQ, such a mouthful, community at that time. But specifically, it was at the height of the AIDS pandemic, you know what I mean? And so a lot of folks were falling, were leaving the community, and some very powerful activists, folks like Essex Hemphill, who was also from Washington, D.C., is very known for his writings and just his social activism within the, Black gay community at that time. And then Audre Lorde, just some amazing Audre Lorde. I'm sure you're familiar with her. She was also part of that space, which was called the Unique Alley Coffee House. So again, for me, it's about amplifying all of these path breakers that some people know about, but it's about elevating and amplifying, their contributions and how they were just making change for the Black LGBTQ community, but that community at large. And it happened right in this space. It's just an incredible story.
This is a thing that we kept hearing across with big studios in history. They're like, well, there's not really a market for it.
Exactly. We still hear that.
We're still hearing it. And you're proving there is a market for it.
It is. There is.
So what is your advice? What I took from that story, like our example with Camille, is she was like, she still went for that grant. Because what's the worst case? They say no, but they said yes.
I got it. Yes.
What is some other things that you have learned from your experience or from any of all of these really unique and inspiring people that you've been telling stories about?
Well, what I've learned, like you said, there is a thirst for, these stories. People are interested, but, and especially now as we look at, how this funding landscape is changing, unfortunately with the shuttering of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, because PBS has been a great platform, for African American storytellers and, producers and directors like myself get an opportunity to produce and expand the narrative and highlight folks like Camille and, the Unique Alley Coffee House. And so now, we're leaning on our ecosystem, the community, because if our community wants, has a thirst for these stories and this knowledge, then we have to hopefully, continue to embrace filmmakers like myself and support, filmmakers like myself. And what helps also is film festivals, just getting the story out there and just, again, exposing these stories to, communities and supporters who have a thirst for these stories, because, a lot of things on, on regular broadcasts or that streaming, they don't, showcase these type of stories. So that's what it's about now. It's about making the appeal to viewers and supporters. And I think, we can create a different iteration of how films and stories, specifically films like what, I'm seeking to do, are funded.
And do you have any resources or tips for people who want to continue, as you said, to tell the stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that historically people, the big names, will not really fund because they say there's no money in it or no one really cares.
Right.
And we're proving them that there isn't. But they don't necessarily get the kind of backing, so they don't get the nice equipment, or they might not get as much experience, therefore.
Or the funding.
Or the funding and all that
Yes.
stuff. Do you have any advice on how people can sort of still make quality work? Because all of your work is quality.
Thank you.
And you have great partnerships. But I'm guessing you also had to work, bit by bit.
Still, it's like, every project, it's like you're starting over. You know what I mean? Because again, as we talked about, it's about finding folks who, the story resonates, who, who see value in supporting it and underwriting that story. And now, again, as we look at this new iteration of funding, is going to be even more competitive. So my advice to, aspiring filmmakers or, folks who really want to do niched, programs or documentaries or whatever, is get a strong subject. That's first and foremost, is identifying someone that has something to share and that's breaking barriers and showing a resilience, especially in this moment in time, and then filming them, getting out there, filming them and keeping them at the center of the story and just being respectful of what is going to work for them as well. Because, oftentimes as producers and directors, we may lose sight of just respecting the subject and their needs. And so I think that's critically important, is that you create that bond with them, but you make sure that what you're seeking to do as far as your creative vision aligns with how they want to be presented in your piece,
That's great advice. Yeah. And it also is always like the anchor or your North Star, because you will get, nervous. You're like, the lighting's this way or this. And
right.
You're like,
and your North Star may change as well. In all projects, you got to learn to pivot. Some things you go in with this amazing artistic vision, and once you start filming, things come up. That you just don't avoid. That's the nature of production, and so that's something I like as well. Just being challenged sometimes, and oftentimes that's where the best innovation and creativity comes from. Those challenges. But you got to be open. You got to be open, and you got to be willing to stretch yourself, because again, as we talk about funding and everything that's changing with the advent of technology, that's also impacting how we tell stories as well. This AI and how people are sourcing content. And so that's what keeps me going, because I'm still learning and growing and stretching myself as well, and trying to, stay, afloat,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
dance, the sustainability it's challenging at times, but if it's your passion and you believe in it, you'll just keep going and you'll make it happen.
That's great advice, Shellée. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to
Well, yeah,
discuss?
I would like to add as well, as we talk about resources and, just having organizations like Women in Film and Video to support, specifically women, filmmakers and directors and producers, because we're still, dealing with that, being in the industry.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the other piece, is like, okay, a lot of us still aren't getting those opportunities, and then, for some of us, we have to deal with ageism, I have my wisdom on the sides here, but, that's real too, I'm
Yeah.
still, I guess, navigating as well, because, to direct and produce now, you're also shooting the camera, you're editing and doing the graphics, you might be, and so that whole, production landscape has evolved too. So yeah, just embracing organizations like Women in Film and Video. When I started, I don't know if you're aware, I was actually the first African American president of Women in Film and Video, in 2003. Yes. And so WIF was very instrumental in helping me and just giving me my wings and my confidence to go out and produce and direct. And I'm still in touch with a lot of the women that I was either on the board with or I met through WIF. And so I think it's critically important that we embrace and support Women in Film and Video and other organizations like WIF as we look at this ecosystem and how we're going to continue to create these stories, I mean, even when I look back at, when I initially, got involved with just the change in all the production houses. I mean, there was a ton of production houses, a ton of documentaries were being produced. We had made, Discovery and BT and all these other, media outlets were right here in our backyard. And so all that's changed, you know what I mean? But as we talk about the advent of technology, it's hopefully at some point we can take advantage of these streamers. I mean, there's just so many networks out here.
Yeah.
And I'm learning, about that too. So hopefully we can get, some funding to underwrite and just understand. It may not be, this big 6-figure budget anymore, but if the story is worthy and it needs to be told, that's when the ingenuity comes in. It's like, well, maybe I don't do 10 shoot days. Maybe I do 6 instead, And so, that's what the moment calls for. And that's, that's what I'm really trying to strive to do as far as the work that I'm creating.
Yeah, I love that. And realizing like the real benefits of a great network and organizations that will get you where you need to go and how you can pay it forward, like joining something like a Women in Film and Video, or like you said, technology and the way people consume content changes so rapidly. When we started Media Maker Spotlight, it wasn't video based. And then they're like, they want video. And we're like, oh, now I got to go put on makeup and all this.
Yes, I know.
But
that's why today I'm like, oh, I'm on camera.
And then we're like, oh, there's no light. And then we're like, we don't have a studio. But no one cares.
I'm in a production. I'm talking about production renovation mode in my house today. So.
But we noticed that it's, we've had people had to record out of the car and it still gets lots and lots of views because people are adaptable. They're like, I'm watching on my phone and I like the content. And we're like, okay, this is good for us to know. There are people who want it. So we should bring it out there because we think there's something to learn from this.
Yeah, that's what I love. We got these devices, we got these platforms. And so, people are consuming content in different ways, which is really, to me, just says there's a need for these stories, and just, there are platforms and different points of distribution. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to stretch myself because I'm old school, I want the pictures to be pretty, the sound to be perfect, and sometimes you just gotta pivot a little bit and just be flexible, so.
Well, if people wanted to learn more about your work, they can go to your website at indigocreativeworks.com.
Exactly. Yes.
And
yes,
I'll have it on the show notes. Thank you so
awesome.
much.
I appreciate it.
And yes, until next time, but all sorts of great content of your work is out there. Check out the one on Camille Brown on PBS. I can put that on the show notes as well.
Yes, and you can navigate from the website too. But yeah, if you just type in, go to YouTube or PBS, because they have PBS American Masters or PBS's website as well. They have the In the Making series, and we're in season 3.
Perfect.
So,
thank you so much. Till
thank
next
you.
time.
All right, and everyone, just keep going.
Thanks for listening to Media Maker Spotlight from Women in Film and Video. To learn more about WIF, visit F as in Frank, V as in Victor.org. This podcast is produced by Sandra Abrams, Candace Block, Brandon Ferry, Tara Jabbari, and Jerry Reinhardt, and edited by Michelle Kim, with audio production and mix by Steve Lack Audio and Ed Saltzman. Subscribe to continue learning from more amazing media makers. Please visit MediaMakersSpotlight.com for more information.